Hello everyone! Now you will hear a brief summary of the film Pawnshop Chronicles. Enjoy watching. An ear-flapped Vernon stumbled into the pawn shop and pointed a shotgun at Elton, but the fool isn't planning to rob the place. He pawned the gun and got $20 for it. On the clearing, the Matt is waiting for its crazy friend, the Nazi Randy. He is pumped up with some junk and hasn't slept for 3 days. Today, he even saw Elvis. Vernon drove up here. They intend to rob someone named Stanley, but how do they do it without a gun now? However, Vernon is confident they'll manage easily, as they'll be 3 against 1. But Randy the Nazi hit Vernon at full speed. What have you done? He stole $80 from the drawer. In general, Randy shouldn't have run over the kid. If he had taken $80, he wouldn't have had to sell his gun for 20. Vernon groans and gurgles with blood. Randy concluded that he doesn't look so bad. They shouldn't get distracted. It's time to go rob Stanley. Poor Vernon was falsely accused by the junkie Lamar, who stole those $80 himself and already spent them on weed. Unfortunately, he didn't have a gun. The comrades went to Old Man Don to borrow a gun from him, but Don sent them away because he had lent them a lawnmower last summer, and they immediately pawned it. In the car, the dog is trying to understand why Randy hates Jews. They look exactly like them, only with money. Also, the dog loves movies with Adam Sandler. Randy held back for a long time, but then slammed on the brakes. If you talk about it again, I'll run you over too. I have no clue either. I am not in the loop myself. Randy even has black friends, and he feels awkward around them when he goes to the White Brotherhood meeting. The Buddhists almost crashed into another car, swerved sharply off the road, drove through a pet cemetery, and miraculously remained unscathed. Next to a tree lay someone's bow and arrows. Since they don't have a gun, they'll try to scare Stanley with this bow. Its owner was relieving himself behind the tree. At this time, Vernon finally came to his senses. A tough guy in a cowboy hat approached him. He offered Vernon help, but the big-eared one is planning to get back at his so-called friends. It's just a shame he doesn't have a weapon. Hearing this, the stranger handed him his cool, shiny shotgun. After all, revenge is sacred. The hound prepared masks so the cooker wouldn't recognize them. It turned out that Randy is terribly afraid of clowns. Robbers broke into the house, but Stanley was already waiting for them and pointed a gun at the fools. The cook immediately recognized the dog and Randy by their voices. After all, they shop with him almost every day. The friends started arguing. The dog got tired of holding the bowstring taut and accidentally released it at one moment. The arrow pierced Randy through. Stanley laughs at these losers. Vernon also barged in with a shotgun. "These bastards hit me with a car and left me like a dead animal." Vernon shot Randy point blank, and he was thrown several meters away. Eard lost it and started shooting randomly in all directions, and there are gas canisters in the house. Vernon noticed them, and after another shot, the house exploded. Elton is selling his red car. After he showed the middle finger to a driver in a big black pickup, that guy is now constantly following him. He'll have to get rid of the car. Newlyweds Richard and Sandy entered the pawn shop. Someone hacked their credit cards, but this inconvenience won't ruin the couple's honeymoon. Richard is going to pawn his wife's wedding ring. Meanwhile, he got mesmerized by a ring with an engraving and got very upset. The man asked Sandy to leave and began to find out how this ring ended up with Kelton. Richard bought it for his first wife, Cindy. 6 years ago, Cindy was kidnapped, and now he finds her jewelry in Syme, states away from their home. Richard is ready to give the ring worth $17,000 in exchange for the band, the red car, and the owner of the pawn shop identified J.J. Thomason and even told where he worked. Richard sent Cindy home and went in search of his first wife. Ura! Buamamini, Buazatan. The pickup driver recognized the red car, but inside it was a different person, and the vehicle headed in another direction. Ricky Baldowski is an ardent fan of Elvis Presley and is trying to become famous as a double of the deceased star. Ricky wanted to exchange tickets for his show for breakfast, or at least for a couple of eggs. Elvis was short 16 cents. The traveler got tired of the poor man's company, and she decided to leave her loser lover. Besides, he doesn't resemble a king at all. You don't have his money, charisma, or voice. Ricky is sure that the woman will regret it. He will become famous. In this restaurant works Gigi Thomason, the cook who pawned the ring. He sent Richard. Richard hit the weakling with a pan, and Ranelle burned his cheek on the stove. I say, if Gigi still doesn't confess, Richard will bake his head right now. In the end, the young man confessed that he stole the ring from his uncle. Richard visited the man and started asking where he got the ring. He said that he won it in poker from someone named Johnny Shaw, but refused to say where he could be found. Moreover, the man wants to get the ring back. A fight broke out between them, and Richard emerged victorious after hitting the opponent a couple of times with a brick on the head. Richard entered his house, found Johnny Shaw's address in the phone book, and took a gun with him. Not only a gun, but a mace as well. Richard found Johnny's house and entered it. On the refrigerator, he saw a pyramid of photos of girls, and at the top was his first wife Cindy. In fact, Richard himself took that picture 6 years ago. The man pointed the gun at Johnny's head and noticed his collection of fishing rods. The kid refused to say where he got the ring and Cindy's photo. He lies that he just found a woman's purse. I'll kill you, Johnny. How fast you decide is up to you. Richard knocked the guy out. Johnny woke up in terrible pain. Richard pierced his face with fish hooks and stretched fishing line all over the house. Johnny's hands and feet were tied so he couldn't move. The guy continued to dodge. Then Richard smashed his teeth with a hammer. One strike was enough for Johnny, and he confessed that Cindy is now in the silo tower. Richard headed to the outbuilding, opened the door, and found his wife in a cage. Was pretty sure that daddy been a teenage. Richard had heard about this syndrome where the victim feels sympathy for the captor. This often happens. Psychologists will help her. And yet, the wife does not seem like herself. Richard got angry, returned to the house, and brutally dealt with the maniac. After that, he finally got his wife out of the cage. Because Cindy is number one. She has her own silo tower, and sometimes she can watch television. Richard realized that there are other captives here. In the neighboring building, he discovered the 5-story pyramid of dog cages. In each of them sat a naked girl. Richard opened all the cages and seated his wife in the car. But the woman continues to follow Johnny's rules. For example, she is not allowed to wear clothes. You shouldn't have let them into the house. They are not allowed. Only me. Twice a month for 30 minutes. Richard showed that little ring and put it on Cindy's finger. Probably God himself helped him find his wife. Unhappy, Cindy immediately took off the ring. The woman wanted to call Johnny and tell him that she was okay, but her husband admitted that he had stabbed him. Richard lost control and crashed into a tree. Cindy died. The man immediately called his second wife and asked for help. Richard, go to hell. That's how Richard died, and the ring returned to J.J. Thomason. Ricky Badulski was almost out of gas, but he managed to get to the pawn shop we know. Ricky pawning his gold medallion, supposedly belonging to Elvis himself, and got 200 for it. Today he has a show, and you can't appear with stubble on stage. The lookalike walked into the barber shop and asked to have his sideburns trimmed. The guy joked that he was a weirdo magician and deliberately shaved the tuft of the sideburn. The insolent guy even demanded 12 bucks for his work. An angry Ricky went into the neighboring barber shop. The barber found out that Ricky first went to his competitor and simply nicked him on the neck with a straight razor, for which he demanded 12 bucks. In the back room, Ricky somehow glued on a fake sideburn. Outside, he encountered a man who had been hanging around the cafe. The stranger offered the loser to trade his soul for success. At that moment, Ricky realized that he was facing the devil himself. Probably the king himself sold his soul to become a superstar. Ricky decided to ultimately decline such an enticing offer. Finally, he arrived at the fair, shaved at the very last moment, and to sparse applause, walked onto the stage. He supposed the performance is utter nonsense. Ricky dances to a crappy soundtrack while the show is put on by two grandmas with flashlights and sparklers. In the end, his costume tore and the tape got stuck. Ricky was booed and pelted with food, although it is unclear what he was expecting. The man saw the devil again and ended up making a deal with him. Suddenly the lighting changed. Professional backup singers came on stage, and Ricky launched into a Christian hymn in Melvis's voice. A crowd gathered around. The commotion drew in captive women who had broken out of their cages. A kindly old man draped an American flag over each of them. Ricky noted that they smelled bad. Just as the performance was ending, Stanley's laboratory beautifully exploded. Ricky Podolsky gained talent and achieved long-awaited fame. A ne, mochico kenjat salakchuash. It was worth it, concluded Ricky, looking at the devil. Right away, a businessman made a contract with him, and even his ex-girlfriend returned, but this time, he dumped her. Nothing to worry about. Johnny Shaw will pick her up, who somehow managed to survive. The girls went back to the farm. When the pawn shop was closing, a dwarf came in and bought a bat for $7. The man admitted that he was the one sitting in the black pickup, and he finally found the guy who poked a finger at him. The aggressor started beating Elton with a bat, but he himself was knocked out with a shovel by J.J. Thomason. Elton was about to shoot the dwarf, but J.J. persuaded him to let him go. He brought that same ring back to the pawn shop again and received $40 for it. The pawn shop closed and this crazy day finally ended.